Míle Mágat, and I want to thank Deputy Doherty and his colleagues for bringing this motion before the Dáil and allowing us to participate in this discussion. I don't think this motion is going to make one bit of difference to the government's approach to the housing policy, and I think we stand here for a different reason. We stand to show that there is a different way to deal with the housing crisis, to let people know that there is a difference between the government and the three parties and those who stand here, not for the sake of opposition, not for the sake of being negative, but to give hope and vision to the people that voted us in. And so what we have here tonight is a motion that seeks to penalise the investor funds at a certain percentage. Other amendments are seeking to do it at a higher rate. I agree with that. However, it's just part of the overall problem. And in the speech that the Minister read out, it's significant that he talked about we're blinded by ideology on this side of the House. Now, if I ever heard anything that was so misleading, that's one of the main misleading things I've heard in my life, because the ideology is completely on the side of the government parties who believe that housing is a commodity to be traded on the market. And the market will provide is the motto of this government and every government, although they use deceitful language to hide that. And then when the market fails, it has demonstrably failed, then you come up with every possible scheme to help the market in every way to make a profit and tell us that's for our good. On every single level, the language they're using is disingenuous, deceitful, and unacceptable. And it's extraordinary that in that speech from the Minister tonight, he didn't mention the homeless figure. So the homeless figure is not worth mentioning. Now that's an extraordinary omission. When we have seen the housing homelessness rise, I think, to their highest point, and it's been quoted here, and I'm going to quote it, 13,514 people homeless, including 4,105 children. In 2020, and it has worsened since then, 121 homeless people died, roughly 10 a month, roughly being the right word here in terms of people sleeping rough figures, and a complete acceptance of that by repeated successive governments that this is simply collateral damage. And we look at Galway City, which I'm very familiar with and spent 17 years of my life as a city councillor, and watched with despair, disgust, words I used earlier today in relation to Gaza, as the housing crisis was allowed intensify. And we stopped building public housing in 2009, Minister. 2009, and we never built another house until 20 or 21. And we have a city now where I'm in receipt of a letter on behalf of a constituent who's more than 18 years on a housing waiting list. And we are told by the City Council that they can't give us any clue, idea or time when that person will be allocated a house. But even worse than that, we're told because that person is on a RAS scheme, that person is deemed a special transfer applicant. Listen to this language, Minister, now. And you might help me to tell this person, after 18 years on a waiting list for a council house, he's been told deemed a special transfer applicant. And then to add insult to injury, they go on in this lovely reply, therefore not technically on the housing waiting list. Not technically on the housing waiting list after 18 solid years. And because that person is not faced with an immediate notice of termination, he's not considered worthy of any consideration, but he will remain on that special transfer list. God knows what it means. We abolished limbo, I've said that many times, but we kept limbo of some sort for the various waiting lists that we have. So we have a waiting list for those that are not in receipt of HAP. We have a waiting list for those in HAP with I don't know what status. We have a waiting list for those in receipt of RAS and presumably rent supplement. And we stand here and we talk tonight about a housing crisis, and the government is simply on close bower a hogal doing, not even listening to us. They're so concerned with giving pat responses prepared by advisors that bear no reality to what's happening on the ground. So what are my solutions in relation to Galway City? We recognise there's a housing crisis. We either abolish the task force that was set up more than 3 years ago, or we ask them to produce a full report with analysis of what they see as the reason for the crisis. We look at a city that has absolutely no overall plan, no city architect, and we have a land development agency that is just about to complete negotiations with the port company to take the land that's there, which is public land, and sell it at a high price to the land development agency so that they can construct premium housing. Can you imagine that, Ken Corla? Premium housing in a city where somebody is 18 years waiting on the list. We have empty houses at any given time owned by the City Council, 100, I don't need to exaggerate. In my own area in the Claddagh, not too far from me, a house remains empty in front of me every day when I pass it for over 3 years. Up to 3 years ago, it was fit to house somebody who died empty. That's one of 100 houses that I could list out here today. And the answer from the City Council, that's only a tiny percentage of our social housing stock. What I would like, Minister, is to stop silly pit-pat across the floor about ideological differences and recognise a housing policy is an utter failure when you have that many people homeless, and they're the ones we count. We're not counting hundreds of others, if not thousands.